Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. It is early, it's 8:41 in the morning. I'm not usually up this early. But let's do the news. Let's do some stories. So I'm looking over the stories that I wanted to do today, and I'm reading through a bunch of stuff that's taking place, and I come across a story from CNN. CNN sucks. It's hard for me to come away from that particular thing. It sucks. I was trying to figure out what to name this video, what to call this particular segment, and ultimately it boiled down to CNN sucks. I hate their point of view. Their point of view is this. I'm going to show you what I mean. It's hard to get it across exactly what it is. It's this distant, faux, objective observer, as it gives a certain American exceptionalist perspective. My problem with this is that perspective is the purveyor of wars, and that perspective allows wars to propagate. You're talking about what the society is looking at as reality, because ultimately that's what media, for the most part, is creating reality. The society not necessarily fully realizing that there's a collaboration between media and government that's seedy and salacious, that ultimately where media is supposed to hold government accountable, ultimately they sell their soul for access. Not to mention the people who are paying media are also the people who are putting money in the pockets of governors or governments. Before we go to the story of the South China Sea, and I'm going to use that story as being an example of what I mean by this, the purveyor of wars, based on this kind of American exceptionalist perspective of the world, that doesn't necessarily fully weigh the other side of it, or doesn't fully weigh the gravity of events from the standpoint of the other side that's doing whatever they're talking about, while completely absolving themselves of a certain amount of responsibility, meaning absolving the disposition to which they're speaking from of certain responsibility and even awareness of the crimes or behaviors that perspective is taking as it castigates another perspective. If that makes sense. It's flaming hypocrisy. It's hypocrisy at a stunning scale, but put through the lens of objectivity from the person who's looking at the story. I know this sounds weird. It's always hard to try to exactly explain it as opposed to show it by example. So I'm going to let this talking head from CNN explain it to Jill Stein, because Jill Stein is taking somewhat of a perspective that I'm taking. You need to be fair. If you're don't have fairness, you're going to have chaos. All of these military matters, many of these things, this chaos, is coming from people who want certain things, who don't necessarily want to be earnest in the way that they want to go about getting those things. So it's something that if you explain to people, they can understand the other side of it, saying, oh, I see how they're coming at this. So let's come to some agreement on this. Instead, it's, I'm going to hide what I've been doing, but I'm going to expose like hell the other side of this matter. Jill Stein makes the point to this guy. How on earth are we pretending as if we haven't engaged in similar, if not same, and in many cases worse behavior? And if you're going to have any conversation about Russian interference and everything else, should you at the very least take that into account before having any conversation? Because if that's not baked into it, anything that you're saying is going to sound utterly ridiculous, seeing as everybody else is perfectly aware of the hypocrisy, even if you're not. Take a look at, listen to what he told Jill Stein when she made that point to him that I just made. This gets across my example of CNN's perspective because he gave it to you. And I think this is somewhat disgraceful from the standpoint of media. I'll explain what I mean further.
We'll see how it plays out. Let me ask you something. With all of the information that's come out since the campaign period, do you still have reservations about whether or not Russia interfered in our election and did so with obvious negative intent?
So let me say, I think it would be naive to think that Russia did not try to interfere. Certainly that's what the United States does, and that's not to justify it. Interference is wrong, and it's an assault against democracy, and it should be pursued. But we should pursue it knowing that we do it too. As James Woolsey, the former CIA head, recently said publicly, I believe it was on Fox, yes, we're doing that, and we always do it. And the records show that we do it about twice as much as the Russians over the course of the past, really since the Second World War. So, you know, this is an issue, and it should be solved, I think, not by, you know, retribution, not by going to war, not by saber rattling. It should be solved really through dialogue and diplomacy, which is showing, that it gets real results on the Korean Peninsula right now. We need to adopt that position right now and not go at it with bombs and missiles and threats, but with international dialogue. And we need a treaty for international non-interference in elections.
That would really be the case for Russia to make, not from the American perspective. Of course, there's hypocrisy involved. Lots of different big state actors do lots of things that they may not want people to know about. But let Russia say that the United States did this to us and here's how they did it, so this is fair play. From the American perspective, and you running for president more than once of this country, shouldn't your position have been, this was bad what they did, they're trying to do it right now, and we have to stop it?
If she's running for president and there is an American perspective, what about you? What is your responsibility as media? Is your responsibility as media to tote that American perspective? Or is it to tote what's true? What she just told you was true. If you're looking at the story, you're not looking at the way Jill Steiner says it, and you're completely absolving America of all of these crimes while at the same token trying to castigate Russia for this quote-unquote interference, then you're missing the case. You're contextually out of whack. It's a certain amount of bias that CNN is heaping onto this that is problematic in regards to the way they go about his affairs. But I suspect that what he just said is the way they go about looking at media. We have an American perspective. This is the perspective that we're going to give. The problem with that quote-unquote American perspective is that it doesn't quite get across the reality. It gets across a perspective, not a reality. And understand what I mean by this. If the media is giving across a story to the American press, to the public, if the media knows that there is another disposition to this, and that that disposition is just as valid as the American perspective, but the only thing that it really pumps out in full throttle is the American perspective, knowing that that perspective is going to lead to conflict. Part of the reason it leads to conflict is because you're not being fair in the way that you're issuing a story or going about your affairs. Then you're going to have a certain amount, I'm saying this poorly. If you're not going to be fair, there's no particular reason why the other party is not necessarily going to take you not being fair. And if you, as the media, is not going to report it that way, then the public is not going to understand why that conflict is taking place. And they're going to look at the other guy as being all that bad because you've completely absolved yourself of blame and guilt and trouble when you've been doing the same thing. It's selective justice to some degree. He's making the point to her, look, you were running for president. Why do you care about this other stuff? You're supposed to be selective in the way that you talk about this case. I'm making the point, or asking the question, is it that CNN also thinks that way? That it is somewhat selective in the way that it talks about the case, even though it is perfectly aware that there are other just as valid perspectives. There's a case that CNN did on the United States warns of ability to take down Chinese artificial islands. That's extremely provocative. Extremely. When to put it in perspective, when China shot down a satellite, China essentially comes out, we have the ability to take down satellites. Now the United States flips out. Oh my God, look at the provocation. They're provoking us. They're provoking us. They're saying that they can take down our satellites. Oh my God, we need more money for the military budget. We need to stop China. They did the same thing with Russia. Russia fires off missiles, and the United States comes out, oh my God, it's a provocation. It's a provocation. They're threatening us. This guy is talking about the ability to take down an artificial island. How is China supposed to take that? How do we take it? Why should there be a difference in the way that each side takes it? Meaning, why should I completely discount the way that they're going to take it, but I'm supposed to raise up how we take it to the rooftops? All right, let's keep going. But that's immensely provocative. That's all I'm saying. Especially when we look at their stuff and we consider it provocative, saying that we're going to take down, or we have the potential to take down one of the islands is a big fucking deal. Let's keep going. So, the Pentagon on Thursday ratcheted up rhetoric about China's militarization of the island in South China Sea, even as the Trump administration presses China for cooperation on North Korea. We are complaining about militarization. We spend $700 billion. If you add in the black budget, if you add in defense stuff, that's over $1 trillion a year on the military. We spend over $1 trillion. You know, China only spends a fraction of that. No other country anywhere close. China spends a fraction of that. The idea that CNN with a straight face can say that some other country is ratcheting up their military is laughable. That's laughable. I'm trying to get this across to you. There's a certain bias built into the perspective. We're spending $1 trillion. China's spending nowhere near it. And we're complaining to some degree about their ratcheting up their militarization of the area. We have military in 70% of the globe. Put that shit in perspective. They're putting military in a certain area around the globe around their particular domain. All I'm saying is that sentence alone is massive and amazing that you can say it with a straight face. They are militarizing that particular area. We've militarized the world. But we're complaining. The mouthpiece of the State Department, that is CNN. When asked by a reporter about the ability of the United States to blow apart one of China's controversial man-made islands, it's controversial to the United States, Kenneth McKenzie, director of the Joint Staff, told reporters, "I would just tell you that the United States military has a lot of experience in the Western Pacific taking down small islands." His comments came amid a growing tension in the hotly contested region as the United States ramps up freedom of navigation operations in response to China's steady militarization of its artificial islands. Think about this. A country that literally has military in 70% of the globe. Put that in perspective. Spending $1 trillion a year on military is complaining through the mouthpiece that is CNN that China is ramping up militarization of that region of the globe that is within their domain and their purview. I just find this to be amazing. Let's keep going. The United States Navy sailed 2 warships within 12 nautical miles of the disputed Parcel Islands in the past week. The first time it has used more than one vessel in its operations, which meant to demonstrate the right of free passage of international waters. And now we have this part. There's always this part. Look, I know we're saying they're militarizing, which has forced our hand in our militarizing. In which case we're sailing these warships there near their territory in a provocative way. We don't have a choice but to do it. We're the good guys. We're the white knights. We're riding in to stop these nasty Chinese from stopping free passage of movement. I find this to be somewhat of an amazing story. Why does the United States get say-so over whether or not China can essentially operate in a particular domain? And I understand that that spot is contested. But let's be honest. This is not all them wrong, all us right. And writing the story from the standpoint of China is increasing their militarization when we have 70% of the globe is laughable. That's utterly comic. But let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let them finish. On Wednesday, Admiral Harry Harris, oh, that's an interesting name, outgoing head of the U.S. Indochina Command, said China was the United States' biggest long-term challenge in the region. Without focused involvement and engagement by the United States and our allies and partners, China will realize a stream of hegemony in Asia. Usually I like to say that term hegemonic, but hegemony in Asia. The Chinese government has reacted furiously to the recent United States statement. At the United States regular press conference on Thursday, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hu Chuing said the United States accusing China of militarizing the region is like a thief crying, "Stop, thief." Why does the United States choose to sail every now and then close to China's South China Sea islands and reefs? What is the United States trying to do? She said. Interestingly enough, you don't have the United States putting in troops in order to protect Palestinians from having their land stolen by Israelis. But in this case, China is supposed to be a huge threat to the degree that they need to sail their ships in this provocative way towards those islands. There is a massive amount of hypocrisy built into any statement like this. and CNN being the utter mouthpiece of the State Department is sad. I wouldn't care so much if they call it state media, but they don't call it state media. They pretend as if this is active journalism. All of this is comments from somebody in the U.S. government. Pentagon on Thursday ratcheted up rhetoric about China's militarization. Okay, Pentagon said, when asked by a reporter about the ability of the U.S. to blow apart China's island, Lieutenant General McKenzie, okay, this is McKenzie talking, U.S. Navy sailed 2 warships. That's just explaining what took place. Here's another person, outgoing, somebody who's in command in the U.S. government, explaining the biggest long-term challenge in the region is China. All of this is the state telling CNN what to say, and CNN writing it as if CNN has 2 brain cells rubbing together, explaining anything about what's taking place. At the very end, or a little bit later, they give you a little bit more information. But listen to this. It gets worse. United States is prepared. Oh, we're prepared. We're going to punch somebody in the nose, because that's where it always goes. As one of the most senior officers in the Pentagon, McKenzie's words carry particular weight. He serves as top official for Joseph Dunford, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and frequently is in meetings with both Dunford and U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis. On Thursday, McKenzie made it clear the U.S. military is prepared to protect the United States and allied interests in the region. We're prepared to essentially fight China for China having influence in its own domain. That's amazing. McKenzie said the United States had a lot of experience taking out small islands. Okay, we did that part. U.S. surveillance has shown movement of Chinese anti-ship and anti-aircraft missiles onto the artificial island during recent drills. They would do that if they say that's their island and they believe that you're going to say something about it. And seeing as you're doing an article, or if the United States State Department is telling you to write this piece saying that we have the ability to take down islands, it would be odd for them not to put military on those islands. I don't quite understand what you're saying here. My issue here is this is state perspective. This is the perspective of the state being put through the lens of some kind of media device that they call CNN, as if it's objective journalism. This is the perspective of state. It is sad. The entire article, for the most part, is what the State Department or somebody in state or somebody in the military told this particular person, and this person is putting it out. These goddamn Chinese trying to have sway over their domain. Don't they know that we have 70% of the military around the globe, and we get to say so in all of these affairs? I just find this to be an amazing article. It's an amazing article. And by the way, the perspective itself causes wars and causes conflict. Just to go back to the original point, that perspective where you take in America first, which is fundamentally the perspective itself. CNN hates Donald Trump, but the perspective is America first. China is militarizing that region of the globe. Would a more balanced perspective be that there is a conflict in that region of the world from the standpoint of what China believes is theirs versus what some of the other countries in that particular part of the world believes is theirs? Yes, that would be more balanced and say so. China is militarizing that region because it knows that the United States has allies with those countries, and those countries, or that the United States may take more provocative moves in order to try to, let's say, take those islands or take that space. Not to mention, you have warships that are literally sailing in that region of the globe that CNN considers to be, to some degree, white knights in the way that story is being written. I find this story to be amazing. And if anything happened where there was a war or there were conflict that breaks out, it's great to know that CNN would explain that the reason why the conflict broke out was because of those damn Chinese who was trying to militarize the island and try to take what apparently CNN believes was not theirs. I don't know whether it's theirs, but at the very least, I acknowledge the fact that the conflict exists and that it's not so much a militarization in abstract, it's militarization because there is a conflict to which they believe that land and that territory is theirs. I believe the first piece where he was speaking to Jill Stein, or talking down to Jill Stein, trying to explain to Jill Stein that Jill Stein should have an American perspective. I strongly suspect that that's the perspective that CNN takes when it does these stories. And I still make the point that that perspective creates and propagates wars. A wider perspective of things, and acknowledging that the other party has validity. At the very least, get you to this over the hump where people can see, okay, these people aren't all bad. These people aren't horrible. These people have a valid claim in the same way that we have somewhat of a valid claim. And you interact from that space. Interacting from the space that we are the good guys in this. There are no good guys in this. There are no bad guys in this. There are people who want certain things. I don't think CNN takes it that way. So I will leave it here. I'm not going to keep this one much longer. This one is gone. Oh, Jesus Christ, 20 minutes. I don't want this one to go 20 minutes. All right. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you guys can always support through Patreon. Thanks, everyone.